Hey, so listen, I'm not trying to I don't know, what's the term? I'm not trying to crash the party. I'm not trying to rain on your parade. That's the term. I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade here because when I was growing up, the Harry Potter films were sort of coming out, and they all came out in rapid succession as I was the same age as the characters, just about. So I was, I want to say 17 when the Harry Potter seventh film came out, or maybe the second part of it came out, and he's 17 in the film. So that was kind of a cool experience to have. I read all those books growing up. That was reading the first and second Harry Potter books together was sort of how my mom helped get me into reading. I was kind of a slow reader for a while, which is funny because I'm a big reader and an author now. So it's funny where life takes you. But I've seen both of the Fantastic Beast films now, and I've kind of had time to sit with them a little bit. And the first Fantastic Beasts film I felt was actually pretty solid. As far as one of those expanded universe films goes, the characters I think really carried it. You always get to one of those points in the film where they're introducing concepts that you're not really expected to remember or even care that much about, but it's sort of just coloring in the little bits of the page so that you can eventually have this big picture of this cool Harry Potter themed world. Yeah, I didn't mind it. I thought that there was a lot of tension within the idea that they had to wipe the minds of all the Muggles at the end. Didn't wasn't a huge fan of the way that that was carried out. Obviously, it makes sense, right? It's normal. But if they could just do that all the time, it makes you wonder why wouldn't they? And I guess that's one of those questions you're not really supposed to ask. You got to suspend your disbelief a little bit. But there is the problem of that and the tension that the Wizarding world has with the Muggle world. And we're all Muggles. We're all the Muggles. They're the wizards. They're kind of the upper class. We're they're the Ubermensch. We're the Untermensch, I guess. And that is sort of the problem with the second film and how it wants to create a commentary on that. Because in the first film, Grindelwald is kind of antagonizing, which, by the way, the worst part of the first film is they do the reveal and the sort of stoic, sinister villain just turns out to be Johnny Depp with a heterochromia and blonde hair. And I just he looks so out of place for that time. He's supposed to, he looks like he's Johnny Depp now, basically. He just traveled back to whatever decade that is supposed to be. I think the 20s or the 30s. So it's just kind of out there. I forget what they call her, not prime minister, but the president of the American Wizarding world, the whatever she's called, the Empress. She is a neat character. She doesn't really do a whole lot. She has a lot of authority, though. The character is played well. It's kind of funny, though, that tension between the whole revealing the wizards in the Muggle world, making that a plot point of the film sort of reveals how weak the idea is. And this is not a film review. I'm going to get to the point in just a second. But I think it reveals how weak the idea of keeping the distance between the Muggles and the wizards is, because somebody pointed this out. I don't know, was it a Tumblr post or something, but in J.K. Rowling's interpretation, right, the wizarding school that is brought up in the first Fantastic Beasts film, the American school, I can't remember what it's called, and I can't really remember the houses of it either. And by the way, American schools don't usually have houses. That's a British boarding school kind of thing. I'm sure American private schools have it, but again, that just hammers home the Ubermensch, Untermensch kind of distinction. I think that the idea that there was this whole wizarding society operating in America the whole time, and that it didn't change a whole lot, with the establishment of imperialism is kind of shocking to me. It's a huge error. I have to see it as an error on J.K. Rowling's part, because when you look at something like that and you think, okay, probably one of the greatest, vying for the greatest genocide in all of history is occurring, right? The just eradication of the Native American people in North America, Central America, South America, and it's being carried out by different imperial entities. But in this area, we're concerned with Britain. And partially with France would also probably be part of this, but like big wizarding community in North America. And what is freaky to me about that is this idea that first of all, the wizards are just watching the Muggles genocide each other. And they're like, well, we can't really do anything about it because we got this whole rule. We can't be always like attacking, like doing the whole like, oh, let's help the Muggles because then they'll know we're wizards. So I think J.K. Rowling's idea is that they are secretly helping the Muggles behind the scenes, like she attributes, I guess, and this is almost like a West Wing pathology. Chapo talks about this. The Chapo guys talk about this in a couple episodes. But no, sorry, not a West Wing pathology. Newsroom. If you know the show The Newsroom, I'll get to that in just a second. It's almost like J.K. Rowling is attributing all of the historical successes to wizards helping behind the scenes and all of the failures to just natural failings of the Muggles. And I think she does that to make the wizards look better. I think this is all by implication. But I think then that sort of makes Muggles look evil, and that just makes you feel like maybe Grindelwald is right a little bit. Like, that's the kind of implication that it has. Maybe Grindelwald's style of, like, intervening as an authoritarian power is in some ways superior to like this non-interventionist wizard isolationist kind of proposition. And it's sort of neither of those are ideal positions, but one of them clearly has arguments. Well, they both have arguments against each other, but one of them that is genocidal has arguments against the other. And that, I think, when you're presenting this kind of, I wouldn't say if it's fascist necessarily, that it's characterized that way in the first film. We'll get to the second film, but it's this sort of like quasi-fascist movement. If you're presenting that and you're saying, well, they make some good points, and you really have to have like a larger critique to back that up, because I feel like if you leave that hanging, all of a sudden you're like, well, Grindelwald has good points, maybe he's the good guy in a way. Just really, really bizarre kind of framing. The other thing, going back to the colonial problem, the other thing about that's disturbing to me personally, at least, is this idea that there are native wizards and there are colonial wizards, and they get along great, and there's never any racism among wizards. But that sort of makes it seem like wizards and Muggles are always completely separate. And that's never been 100% true. J.K. Rowling makes the point in the books of saying, yeah, there's always been a kind of intermingling, and there's always been purists, and there's always been progressives and things like that. More open-minded wizards versus more closed-minded ones. Pure blood families, mudbloods, whatever you want to call it. There's been, and for those who don't know the language, I guess, if you don't know Harry Potter, why are you watching this video? This is a weird video to watch. Mudblood is a wizard that's born of muggles. Whereas if you're a muggle born of wizards, you're a squib. And those people are like anathema to wizarding society. They're shit on all the time. Almost, I would say, probably almost more maybe, or as much as the Mudbloods. And Mudblood, of course, is in contrast to Pure Blood, which is when all of your family are wizards as far back as you can remember. But I think actually Rowling makes mention as a counter-argument in one of her books that, or at least in some of her extended writing, that you really can't it's not physically possible for a wizarding family to go all the way back into infinity. Like at some point, for genetic reasons, you would have had to have had quote unquote muggles or other, at least other groups of wizards who weren't as pure inducted into your family. And then, of course, in between those disparate positions of the Mudbloods and the Purebloods, you've got the Half-Bloods, that sort of part of what makes up the title, the Half-Blood Prince, which refers to Severus Snape, spoiler alert. That's the 6th book and 6th movie. Quite good, I actually think. I think that one's pretty good. It's got that kind of element of discovery that makes some of those fantasy books really great. Kind of leads you on and like lets you put things together for yourself. in much the same way that I think the fourth book and the third book do. The third book is more of an Agatha Christie kind of situation where you get the rug pulled out from under you and there's a twist. Like, there's a kind of an M. Night Shyamalan bit at the end. But yeah, fourth and sixth books, very good. Best Harry Potter movie, definitely the third movie, I would say. It's got the best, like, Halloween aesthetic to it. I think tonally, it's all pretty good. The pacing of it seems to work out pretty nicely. I don't have a lot of issues with that. I think there's some weird pacing, and I don't always like that people complain about pacing, because I think that if you're in a certain genre, or if you're even in a certain series in a genre, films can make their own pacing. Like, when the first couple Star Wars films came out, people were probably like, wow, these films have terrible pacing. But now, when a Star Wars film comes out, my first thought is, oh, the Star Wars film has a Star Wars film's pacing. Like, they've kind of set a standard for themselves. And I think, whereas the Harry Potter movies, I think, kind of dither a little bit. Like, I'd say the first, maybe the second, and the third have pretty solid pacing. The fourth, the fifth, they get a little bit tricky, and then it's hard to judge the final one because, like, it's technically two different movies, part one and part two, but they're meant to be watched. Like, one leaves off exactly where two picks up, so it's almost like they're meant to be watched as one. So you could, I guess, have an argument about how to judge pacing when you've got a film like that, or a pair of films like that. Number 6, I think, is a great return to having a certain kind of pacing. I think there's the definite sense of progression in that film. Very standard. I don't know, there's all these dogs barking outside, and I don't know why the dogs are barking. I hope nothing weird's going on. We've got coyotes that live in our neighborhood. Sorry, this is a tangent about Harry Potter, this is a tangent about dogs within a tangent about which Harry Potter books are best. This is not what this video is meant to be about. This is a critique of the new Harry Potter films, but I feel like if I just ignore everything about the other series, it's not really going to hit home for people. So anyway, we're going to go back. So I think I've kind of set the stage for the introduction of the second film. That is the second Fantastic Beasts film. I think they're doing a third. I might be wrong about that. It probably would be best if I'm wrong about that. Hopefully, if they do make it, it's going to be like the first and less like the second, although I highly doubt that. The second has just it does a lot of wrong. I wish I could be one of those people who's like, yes, here's a video where I have all the flaws of the Fantastic Beasts films, and I'm going to do a little ding every time there's an inconsistency. But the real problems of it, I think, need to be dove into, like, kind of more deeply, because I take serious issue with the execution of some of the characters, like Dumbledore, right? Very well acted in the film. We're talking the second Fantastic Beasts film, The Crimes of Grindelwald. Very well acted character. The actor did a great job. I think, there's nothing about his, like, costume design or anything that's off. He's presented very well, is what I mean. However, the writing. His dialogue is okay, but once you realize what he's saying and what the plot is about, you start to realize there's kind of a problem. So Grindelwald has this little file, and the file contains, like, a blood oath that he and Dumbledore made that they would never fight each other. So this, and the lead, I can't remember the guy's name, and that sucks because he's the author of the book Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. It's something Newt Scamander. There it is. I had that in my Harry Potter section of my brain somewhere, and I had that in the restricted section. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, I like intensely feel that that's hugely offensive to Dumbledore's character, because Newt Scamander, okay, he has to go get this file from Grindelwald so that Dumbledore can finally fight Grindelwald, right? And at the end, he delivers it to Dumbledore, and then they're like, aha, finally I'm released from this oath, I can do the fighting, I can take care of Grindelwald. And this plays on the commentary between Dumbledore and Voldemort, who Dumbledore was never afraid to face, And it was said that Dumbledore was the only one that Voldemort ever feared in the books. It's said quite a few times. It's the name of a chapter where they fight. So it's a pretty intense concept in Harry Potter. I think they're playing that up for this different sort of rivalry. Here's the problem with that. In the 7th Harry Potter book and the 8th movie, Deathly Hallows Part 2, Harry... I'm sorry, this is just full of spoilers. I'm sorry if I'll put something in the description. I'm sorry about that, but I really can't. But I can't be bothered. Harry dies towards the end, and he has to die and come back because he's part person and part Voldemort's Horcrux. So he's essentially got two souls, and he has to die and then choose with his regular Harry Potter signature Harry Potter soul. He has to choose to come back, and he doesn't have to, but he does. That's part of his mission. That's his call to action at the end. And Dumbledore meets him there in the afterlife, sort of in like a purgatory. It's presented as like a train station, and he speaks with Harry, and sort of like all is not revealed because we knew more or less everything at this point about all the secrets that Dumbledore kept from Harry, but you get the catharsis and the emotional resolution of Dumbledore and Harry finally talking. And I think it's actually a pretty good scene. I like the way it's done in the film. I like the way it's written. There's nothing about that scene that bothers me, but what is contained in that scene is especially moving because Dumbledore admits to Harry, he said with respect to going after Grindelwald, he said, I think I was a coward because I was probably running away from the truth because when he was younger, he and Grindelwald and his brother, what's his brother, Aberforth, yeah, they get in a fight. And they're casting spells and everything, and shit's getting serious. One of the spells gets reflected and kills Dumbledore's little sister. And he carries that with him for the rest of his life. It's one of the reasons why he's a very somber and compassionate person. But it's also one of the reasons why he's afraid to face Grindelwald, because he's afraid he might find out the truth. That it was his spell. That his hand was the one that killed his sister. So he's scared. And facing that fear is a huge part of Dumbledore's character, and oftentimes his refusal to face a fear. Cowardice is actually a big character flaw of Dumbledore's. And this film removes cowardice entirely, and it gives the wisdom of the old Dumbledore to the younger Dumbledore, who by all means should be presented as being, intelligent but cowardly. So this film sort of undoes all of the, I guess, character progression by flashback or by exposition that Dumbledore gets, because we only ever see Dumbledore as an older man in the original series, but we do hear about his backstory, and we understand his progression as a man. But this film undoes that completely. And that is one flaw of this film. That is not the only flaw of this film, but I think it's the biggest emotional offense of the film. It really hammers home that these writers did not really care about how this would impact, I guess you can call it, the canon of the Harry Potter universe, of the films and the books. They didn't really... They didn't care. Or if they cared, they didn't put the effort in, And that, in a way, that's almost worse, because I can imagine a Hollywood exec kind of looking at something like this and going, yeah, whatever, you just slap a Harry Potter on it, they go on magic adventures, everybody's happy, the kids will love it. I can imagine that, and apparently J.K. Rowling signed off on a bunch of this. So I think in a way she's almost, I guess you can sort of look at her and say she's kind of bastardized her own work. And I'm treating J.K. Rowling exclusively as an author here. I'm not going to get into her personal politics. I don't think it's relevant. But I think that was always a lot of people's biggest disdain for J.K. Rowling, was that she created this thing and then kind of shat all over it, which, if your fans think that about you, can give them a very bad impression of you. I mean, you look at what fucking happened with George Lucas. I mean, I don't even think he shat all over his own work. I think he took a bold, transformative attempt at broadening it, and people still treated him like he was assaulting his own genius. And I think, in a way, what J.K. Rowling has done is worse than anything in the Star Wars prequels. Erasing Dumbledore's cowardice is, and who knows whether they'll rectify this in the next film, I don't know. But that is worse than doing 10 Jar Jar Binkses, you know? It's not tenable. It's not something that the rest of the series can survive, because it annihilates the real crux of Dumbledore's character flaw, his biggest character flaw. So, yeah, that's my first criticism of the Crimes of Grindelwald. Second criticism, and this is, again, people don't like Johnny Depp for personal reasons. I'm not going to get into that. I have a really hard time caring at this point, to be honest, but I more so just think that having him here is kind of an attempt to just be like edgy or like quirky. I think quirky more so. Like, he's supposed to bring this kind of like quirky, kind of weirdly magnetic quality to the character of Grindelwald. But I don't know, man, like, Grindelwald is always talked about as this kid who everybody liked, like, in much in the vein of like a Dumbledore or a Voldemort. He was growing up, he was something everybody liked. He was considered a genius. Which they do show a lot of, like, Grindelwald's, like, funny, like, unique powers, like, he's a very powerful wizard or whatever. That's true. But it doesn't, it doesn't properly convey the way that he was able to lead people socially. And I think that's a big mistake, because Grindelwald should be, like, one of the 20th century fascists, he should be, in a lot of ways, Voldemort is more of like a Thatcher or a Reagan, but I think Grindelwald is much more in the vein of like a Mussolini or a Hitler, really, in not so much his rhetoric, but in like a lot of his implicit beliefs, and also in his character and his presentation of himself. Like, he's supposed to be this really almost hyper normal guy. He's like everybody's like ideal, like, brother, best friend. He's just got a magnetic social quality, and Johnny Depp doesn't really have that. I mean, I'm sure he could act it out if he tried, but in this film, he's not presenting as that at all. He's presenting as like the funny, like, quirky wizard. He draws more attention by his looks than he does by his statements. I've almost forgotten everything Johnny Depp says in the film, strictly because of how weird he looked while he was doing all of it. And that's unfortunate, because this character should be, by quality of the things he says and how, you can relay, like, how intense is he? How sinister is he? These are things you can relay without making him look like somebody's OC, quite frankly. So that, I think that was kind of a mistake. If you really have to cast Johnny Depp, you could have just made him up better than that. Honestly, it was a poor design choice. Third thing, I suppose, it's time to, like, start hitting on the big ones. So the original cast returns. Very cool. There's this big thing because some of the, I don't know, I guess you'd call them like circus sideshow freaks, is what they're treated as, are working in this little fair, and one of them is, what's his face? I keep wanting to call him Constance or something. I don't know. So the kid who is the fucking, like, shadow demon looking ass thing from the first film, which the first film makes exquisitely clear that he is by the day coming apart as a person, and that he can't long survive this state of being. And at the end, it has what is apparently his death. Well, in this film, he's back, and It doesn't seem like there's any clock on his existence anymore, which is like they're just disregarding the original text, which is, I think, of the first of many mistakes with his character. But also, they sort of try to make it look like Grindelwald is using him to get ahead. Like he needs his powers to sort of supplement his movement of dark wizards. It's just unnecessary. This film has too many threads, and that one honestly does not bring a lot to it. It really doesn't. There's some neat scenes in the fair and the circus. There's like one emotional scene with, I think, what's his name, Constance? I don't know. Constance Kilroy, Connie, I don't know what his name is. Eustace? He reminds me of Eustace from the friggin' Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series. Chronicles of Narnia. I don't know why that was so hard for my brain to pick that up. Restricted section, etc., etc. So anyway, this character just absolutely, he does not add a lot to the film. I gotta be real with you. There's some big debacle about his lineage. You know, is he Lestrange or is he not? Which honestly, a lot of these fantasy films, I honestly think it's for lack of material. I really do. This focus on lineage, because I think it's a very medieval tendency to make one's power or importance in fantasy about their nobility. And just historically, that's a fact of medieval literature. But it's also a fact that it seems like a lot of these films get very sparse at certain points. And by these films, I'm not just throwing shade at Crimes of Grindelwald. I'm also throwing a little shade at Rise of Skywalker. And it was less important to the two films prior to Rise of Skywalker in that trilogy. But I think Rise of Skywalker, honestly, it was for lack of material that they had to do that whole thing about Rey's lineage. I'm not going to spoil that here because that's a more recently released film, and I will do a video like this about my Star Wars feelings. Do not worry. I am always full of rants. So I think it's just a lack of material. Like, if you wanted to, you could have made this great film about Grindelwald's fascist uprising with a compelling portrayal of Grindelwald. Like, that could have been an Oscar-type film. I don't know anything about awards. I don't even know if that's the Film Awards one. I don't care what rich people think is good. But that could have been an award-winning film regardless. I can sense that it could have been. And it won't ever be, because they really torpedo any sense of importance of the common person. Because it's all this focus on, like, oh, this nobility, is this kid noble? Is he not? Well, you know, some of the casual people in the crowd who just die because they get, like, hexed or whatever, those people probably have stories just as important as this kid who, in the last film, was just one of those people. He was just one face in the crowd. And it was made very clear by his upbringing in the orphanage and everything. But now he's like special. So it's not just that he has relevance because of what he's experiencing. It's also because he's got some special lineage. And it's just honestly such a poor direction for the character. It doesn't really do him anything good. It's a disservice to the character. It's a disservice to the plot line. It's another thread that doesn't really go anywhere. And here's another thread that's connected to that thread that also did not go anywhere. The whole issue with, and I don't want to say the whole, like, is his name Constance? I don't know, and I won't look it up. I refuse. I won't say that it goes nowhere. All right, that's an exaggeration. It does become important to the plotting of the film, but I think that's almost worse than if it went nowhere. If it was just dropped at some point, I would forgive it. But it's the fact that they made it so important. It almost supplants the things we're supposed to actually care about. I suppose that's where you should be with your critique of that. You meaning me. So, as a component of his story, he also runs with someone else from that same circus, Nagini, who, yes, is the snake from films 4, 5, and 6. Do not ask me why they made that choice. It's honestly, it's in the same vein of like J.K. Rowling making a tweet about how actually all the wizards for hundreds of years pooped their pants because they could just magic it away. And I even know what she's referencing with that. Like, she's referencing like fucking not Victorian. I don't know if it was Victorian or pre-Victorian, but there would be like these noble courts, and because the get-ups were so fancy in like France and England, the rich people would poop themselves where they stood rather than like actually like go to the bathroom and undress and such, like, because they couldn't do it all by themselves. It would take too much time, and it was just too much of a process. So they literally were just stinky. They were stinky boys. That whole thing, that's facts. You can look it up. I'm sure I got the date wrong, but you can look it up. So I know why she said that about wizards and the whole magicking the poop away thing, but it wasn't necessary. Nobody asked. And if they did, ignore those people. As a creator, you can't answer everybody's prayers. So this felt like that. This felt like making Nagini into something she never should have been. Honestly, just being a cool talking snake is fine. Sometimes a snake is just a snake lady, but now they literally made a snake lady. And you have to sort of adjust your concept of who Nagini was, which is sometimes okay to do with a new character, but again, doesn't really add a lot. It just puts someone in Constance's corner. That's not his name, and I'm gonna look like such an asshole. I swear to God, that's not his name, but I don't remember. Connor. His name's Connor now. So in Kilroy's corner, you've got Nagini, and he I guess he likes her, but then he also leaves her at the end. Like, she's not that important to him, and that's played for like emotions. But like these two haven't even known each other that long. Like, he escaped in the previous film, so we know where he's been. It's not like they have some storied history together. I guess there's a romance implied there, but it's honestly like it's underwritten, so why do we care? Like, it's not, there's nothing going on there. So that's just like another unnecessary and honestly unworthy thread that just you don't really follow it to any particular conclusion. However, as I mentioned earlier, the original cast returns in this film. Yeah, I actually liked them in the original film. In particular, in the cast, and fuck me if I can remember the rest of their names. There is the character who is the sister of the woman who works for the Ministry. And there's an implied relationship between Newt Scamander and the woman who works for the Ministry. Blah, blah, blah. Her sister and the Muggle man, who is one of the leads, they have a relationship, and it's very cute. And like, I'm gay, and you won't hear me cheering for a lot of like heterosexual relationships, but it is cute, and it's funny, and it's well written, and I liked it. They have some play with them in the new one, like they create some little dramas between them, and most of that gets resolved and is fine, except for one thing. So they don't know how to have a relationship, and this is nice because it follows up on a thread from the previous film. How do these people actually live their little like happily ever after? And that's I don't think that's a bad thing to explore. But the problem is, you've got, let's say, this character, right? He is a Muggle. You've got this other character. She is not merely a witch, not merely an Ubermensch, but a well-to-do Ubermensch. She's a bourgeois Ubermensch. So that's the highest tier. Or at least that's how she's presented. Like, she always seems to be wearing fancy dresses and doing fine dining and such. She's got that kind of accent. It sort of implies a certain existence on her part. With all of that going on, I don't know how to put this, but there's a tension in their relationship naturally due to the canon of Harry Potter, but also because the film only superfluously discriminates against muggles. Like, they don't really get into it a lot. There's this big climax where Grindelwald has a rally. And these two characters who have they love each other, but they've been at odds for the film because, one of them wants to be with the other, but the other one realizes it's a risk and they could get hurt. When they're at the rally, they sort of part ways, and Queenie is her name. I remember that because that's the best name of all the characters. She joins with, of all people, Grindelwald, and it does not make any sense. I mean, you can understand if you've got if you're coming at this from a class analysis perspective, you can see how a bourgeois Ubermensch who still loves a Muggle would still side with Grindelwald, because it's just like to say that, oh, you can be a rich white person and love a black woman and still be racist, something like that. So this is very much what's being represented here, except for the fact she's not doing this because she has some sort of implicit hatred of Muggles. That would be an interesting character dynamic between her and her love interest. But no, the reason why she's doing it is because she thinks that Grindelwald is promising equality. And this is the fundamentally sinister thing about Grindelwald's rhetoric in the film. So, in the books, originally Grindelwald is sold to us as this character who used the mantra for the greater good. That was what he said he was kind of searching for the greater good. And that is kind of like almost like a post-ideological statement. Like, you can clearly see Rowling's not trying to be political there. She's not saying, oh, this is what communists are like, oh, this is what fascists are like, necessarily. She's sort of trying to be neutral and talk about, like, what happens when an authority could persuade, like, a group of people that they're doing a bad thing, but they're doing it for the right reasons. And that is kind of what Queenie gets caught up in. But the problem with that is that we're actually exploring the present day of Grindelwald, and that means that we sort of have to have a look at what is the political state of this place. And this, by the way, this all happens in Paris, and I never, ever, ever, ever in the books got the sense that Grindelwald had anything to do with Paris, that any of this drama happened in Paris. I was convinced that he was like either German or from like some Scandinavian country. So this threw me for a loop, and I don't really think it was a good choice. I think they did that because they were going with the drama around the name Lestrange for Constance Owens. I don't know. They probably, there was a weird reason that they did it, but this drama with Grindelwald is, it's really superfluous. It's very, what's the term? I'm searching for a word here. It's very, like, superfluous, not superfluous, but, like, superficial, I suppose. It's very, like, it's a surface level kind of critique. Like, if you stepped on it, the ice would crack. Because Grindelwald's ideology fundamentally is the supremacy of wizards. So he is a supremacist movement. So he's kind of a fascist, and that's a political description. And I don't think Rowling is willing to make that distinction. So we just get this whole, like, oh, for the greater good thing, he's promising good things, but he's going to do bad things. Well, I think that sort of, it's not wrong. That general characterization of fascism isn't wrong. However, I think it misses the core of fascism. So you've got this kind of, again, very surface level critique of fascism in what doesn't have to be an overtly, political film, but it has inherently a political atmosphere. And because we're going with the idea that we're going to follow Grindelwald, which they don't do enough, and because Grindelwald is presented as A, having a lot of, like, good ideas, and B, his fascism is really understated or misrepresented, because of that, honestly, they literally have to show him murdering a baby in order. That literally happens, by the way. He Avada Kedavra's a little baby after they kill the parents. They literally had to show that to establish how bad he is, because the rest of the film doesn't do it. If you watch the rest of the film without the little murder sequences, you could probably come away from it saying, yeah, some of the bad guys are not good, but Grindelwald seems like a pretty decent guy. The problem is, I don't think the baby murder scene, if I know Americans, I don't think the baby murder scene is going to put anybody off of believing that he's a good guy. So it's really unfortunate, and I don't think that they ever really accurately represent what Grindelwald's politics probably should be. So I think that's the biggest sin of the film. From an ideological standpoint, from a critique of the film's politics. But obviously, we've gone through a lot of other things. I'm just going to let this go now. I have to stop talking about it, but that is my sort of reflection on the crimes of Grindelwald. The crimes of Grindelwald. I'm sure some YouTuber has already used that for a thumbnail. Look, don't hate me. I'm just playing the game. I don't know, Patreon, and we've got all the Patreon like my video stuff. Actually, we have a storefront now. We have a little Teespring. Obviously, I just made it all myself using Teespring. But you can go to Teespring and you can order our shirts. You can get the shirt with a little rune on it from the little bite-sized videos that I sometimes do. You can get shirts with the wife material, my cute little anime face on it. You can get the sad waifu shirt, which is from my streams. It's got the Twitch emote on it. And I also made I'm making a couple other things on there. So you can have fun with that if you truly desire. Obviously, it's a way to support the channel and help me out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So Patreon, shirt storefront. I've got probably a link to like some Let's Plays and games that I sometimes upload to an alternate channel. I have a Twitch that you can follow. Your Gamer Waifu is the name for both of those. And honestly, I just hope that everybody has a really nice night. I never know how to end a video. You always think, oh yeah, have a good day, be well, blah blah blah. But I never know how to end fuck man, I never know how to end one of these videos. I hope I don't do another video about Harry Potter, honestly.